Hey guys, tonight we wander down the chaotic, smoky lanes of a medieval fair, your senses assaulted by the mingled aromas of roasting meats, crushed herbs, and something suspiciously sweet bubbling in a cauldron. The sky's dimming into twilight, the torches are lit, and the air is thick with chatter, laughter, and the occasional donkey bray. You pass by jugglers and fortune tellers and are pulled nose first toward the scent of honey-drenched fritters frying in bear fat. Welcome to the strange and sticky world of medieval junk food. You probably won't survive this, by the way, not if you have a modern stomach. But still, you'd be tempted. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at the edge of the fairground, and the smell hits first sweet, spicy, and a bit scorched. It's a food stall, a plank of rough oak balanced on barrels lined with sticky pastries and heaps of sugared nuts. You grab a warm fritter dripping with honey laced with cloves and crushed dates. It's so sweet your teeth hurt instantly, but that doesn't stop you. Fairs like this were the fast food court of the medieval world. They popped up during festivals, saints' days, and seasonal markets, filling towns with temporary booths where peasants and nobles alike could indulge. And you're right in the middle of it, wiping honey off your chin. Next to you, a vendor is stirring candied almonds in a wide copper pan over coals. They're coated in a thick, hard shell of sugar spun from boiled down honey or imported cane sugar if you're lucky and rich. This wasn't just snack food, it was status. Sugar was exotic, expensive, and often locked away like treasure. But tonight, you're splurging. Historians still argue whether these treats were everyday indulgences or rare festival delights, but there's no debate that sweets had a place at every social level. Even peasants would have known the taste of honey-fried dough, especially during holidays. You wander further into the fair, brushing past a loud juggler and a girl selling fried cheese balls on skewers. They sizzle in sheep fat and smell incredible. Are they clean? Probably not. Do you care? Also probably not. You stop at another stall offering little spice cakes, dense bricks of flour, molasses, ginger, and dried fruit. They taste like something between a cookie and a roof tile, but they last for days. Bakers shaped them into hearts animals, even saints edible icons with surprisingly sharp edges. And there's more. Fried apples dusted with cinnamon, wafers stamped with religious symbols and sold by church fundraisers, a hard-to-identify lollipop on a stick that might be made from boiled-down mead. And in the corner, a daring soul is selling roasted pine cones drizzled in syrup, because why not? But not every treat is toothsome. One stall offers sin-cleansing licorice, a black bitter paste wrapped in linen. The label says it's good for digestion, but the vendor is suspiciously eager to get rid of it. You taste it anyway. Huge mistake. Somewhere a monk is laughing. Of course, no fair would be complete without someone trying to cheat you. That meat pie you bought might not be pork. It might not even be meat. But it's hot, salty, and wrapped in pastry. And honestly, that's enough. At the center of the fair, a makeshift stage features a cook theatrically flipping pancakes over open flame. Children cheer, adults jeer, and you duck as a stray cake flies into the crowd. Some things never change. And here's a little-known tidbit, some medieval sweets doubled as romantic gifts. Want to win someone's heart? Forget roses. offer a gingerbread token with their name scratched in icing. In some towns, these tokens were thought to spark love, or at least intense indigestion. You finally find a quiet bench under a torchlit archway, your lap full of medieval confections. Your fingers are sticky, your stomach is confused, and your brain is already halfway to a sugar crash. But for a few fleeting hours, you've lived like a true medieval fairgoer, stuffed slightly filthy and completely content. You're still licking the last of the honey from your fingers when the smell of baking pastry lures you toward a crooked wooden shack on the edge of the square. A chalkboard reads simply PIES. No details, no ingredients, no questions answered. Welcome to the culinary gamble that is the medieval street-side pie stand. The vendor eyes you with the practiced squint of someone who's lied about pigeon meat before. He gestures to the tray's half-moon pies, open-faced tarts, lidded rounds, oozing juices, and one that suspiciously twitches. You point to a safe-looking golden-crusted option and take a bite. It's savory, meaty, spiced. But you have absolutely no idea what kind of meat it is. And frankly, that's part of the fun. In medieval towns, pies were the ultimate grab-and-go meal. Compact, durable, and able to disguise just about anything you could catch, scavenge, or steal. Rabbit, pigeon, eel, or even squirrel, it all tasted better once wrapped in dough. Some crusts were edible. Others, called coffins, were made purely to hold the filling and were tossed out after. Unless you were starving, which you probably were. One popular variation was the humble pie, a dense mixture of animal innards, onions, and thick gravy. You're told nobles ate the prime cuts, while the servants got the humbles, hence today's phrase, to eat humble pie. Although historians still argue whether the expression truly comes from that dish, or if it's just poetic coincidence. Either way, the humble pie smells a bit intestinal. But not every pie is a peasant's gamble. Wealthier vendors offered fruit pies stuffed with pears, figs, or currants imported from sunny southern lands. You spot one filled with something purple and jammy. It's labeled medlar. You taste it. It's like a fermented apple met a plum and whispered secrets about rot. Surprisingly delicious. Quirkier recipes existed too. One 14th century cookbook included a pie made from porpoise, another from songbirds. One noble banquet supposedly featured a coffin crust filled with live birds designed to burst out when sliced like a feathered jack-in-the-box with talons. You pass a trio of kids sharing a miniature meat pie, arguing over whether it's chicken or cat. The mother shrugs. Long as it's hot. You laugh nervously and take another bite of your own, now doubting your taste buds. Of course, these pies weren't just food. They were portable status symbols. The addition of saffron cinnamon, or even a touch of sugar, marked a pie as luxury. You see a man unwrapping a pie from cloth, clearly handmade and neatly pinched into the shape of a fish. That's not just lunch, that's edible fashion. Still, not all was merry in Pieland. Food fraud was rampant. In fact, records from London's cook guilds detail countless complaints. Meat pies containing no meat, spoiled fillings covered with extra spice, even rat pies sold to drunks. Officials occasionally inspected vendors, but many simply bribed them with, you guessed it, more pies. And here's something you probably didn't expect. Some pies were made for the dead. Funerary pies offered at wakes or left on graves sometimes contained spiced beef or symbolic fillings. One fringe tradition even included writing a curse on parchment and baking it into a pie intended for a rival. Talk about indigestion. You find a stone bench near the cathedral steps and sit with your second pie, this one oozing something bright orange. Pumpkin nut. More like cheese and egg yolk. It's rich, oddly satisfying, and definitely not FDA approved. But it's warm and the crust is buttery flaky and blessedly recognizable. In the background, a drunk bard sings a song about a pie with legs. You think he's joking. You hope he's joking. Somewhere behind you, a cart crashes. A dog yelps. A vendor shouts that her pigeon pies are 2 for a groat. And you start to wonder how many pigeons are too many pigeons in one night. But hey, if you're gonna get food poisoning, at least let it be medieval and wrapped in crust. You wake the next morning. Well, medieval morning, meaning just after sunrise because roosters don't snooze and your stomach's still full of mystery pie and syrup-drenched regret. You're thirsty, desperately thirsty. So you reach for a mug of, oh right, there's no bottled water here, no taps, no filters. Just whatever the townsfolk have scooped from the nearest stream well or communal trough. And that's why you're reaching for the ale instead. In medieval Europe, drinking water was often a gamble you didn't win. Wells could be shallow, contaminated, or located suspiciously close to latrines. Rivers were worse polluted with everything from tannery runoff to livestock waste. People weren't stupid, they just lacked plumbing. So fermented beverages weren't just for fun. They were survival. You raise your clay mug and take a long swig of small ale, a lightly fermented low-alcohol beer that even children drank with breakfast. It's warm, slightly sour, and a bit cloudy, but it's not likely to kill you, which is a win. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly avoided water altogether or simply knew to source it carefully. Some say they boiled it when they could. Others insist beer was just tastier and safer, so why not drink it all day? Whatever the case, you're already pouring yourself another cup. But maybe you want something sweeter. You find a vendor selling mead-fermented honey water. It tastes like flowers and fire. Rich folks drank it at feasts. Peasants might sneak a sip at a wedding. It's expensive, slow to make, and gloriously unnecessary. But wow, it hits the spot. There's also posset, a kind of hot milk curdled with wine and spiced with ginger or nutmeg. It's what your medieval grandmother might give you if you had a sore throat, or if you were about to pass out from too many pies. Over in the merchant quarter, a woman with ink-stained fingers is selling tiny jars of aqua mirabilis or miracle water. You take a sniff. It's floral sharp and suspiciously alcoholic. She calls it medicinal. You call it mouthwash with ambition. Want something non-alcoholic? Good luck. You try a swig of cider vinegar water, supposedly refreshing. Your eyes water. Your soul briefly leaves your body. But hey, it's technically hydrating. And then there's Hippocras, a spiced wine favored by nobles and would-be apothecaries. Red wine infused with cinnamon cloves and ginger strained through cloth until sweet and smooth. You sip some and instantly feel like you should be dictating a poem or plotting a duel. For the kids, boiled drinks, herb-infused water with sugar if you're lucky. Dandelion root. Rose hips. Marshmallow. Not the squishy treat the plant. Tastes like dirt and discipline. But parents swore by it. Even monks brewed up these weird concoctions, offering them to the sick, the devout, or the hungover. Of course, there were always rumors about water spirits. Some villagers believed certain springs were guarded by fae or cursed by witches. Drink from the wrong one, and you'd either gain eternal beauty or erupt in boils. Depends on the vibe, apparently. And here's the quirky fringe bit. In some places, people believed you could purify water by dropping a blessed relic into it. Like a saint's toenail. Yes, really. Nothing screams hydration like floating saint bits. You walk through the morning market mug in hand, watching everyone sip slurp or swig something slightly fermented. A group of boys trade marbles for black beer, a thick syrupy drink made from malt and licorice. An old woman hawks herbal cordials that taste like sweet cough syrup and probably double as floor cleaner. By noon you're buzzed but hydrated-ish. Your last stop is a bathhouse. Yes, some towns had them, and you hear someone mention beer baths for the skin. You sneak a glance. Two guys are sitting in what looks like warm ale, laughing like toddlers. You're tempted. You really are. You sit on the edge of a barrel, take another sip of your now slightly skunky ale, and smile. In a world where water could betray you, the line between refreshment and ruin was always a little frothy. You round a corner near the edge of town and come upon a scent that makes your nose wrinkle before your brain can catch up. Burned fur over roasted garlic. Something gamey. You squint into the smoke curling from an open fire pit and see it a cluster of skewers turning slowly over the flames, some looking vaguely rodent-shaped. The cook flashes you a toothless grin. Fresh catch, he says. Mostly rats, maybe a hedgehog. You probably won't survive this either, but your curiosity is stronger than your survival instinct. In the leaner seasons, like, say, every season, if you were poor medieval folks had to get creative. If it moved, it could be food. Hedgehogs, dormice, frogs, badgers, jackdaws, nothing was off the menu if your options were starvation or squeamishness. You take a seat on a log by the fire and accept a stick with something crispy skewered on it. It smells of time and desperation. Historians still argue whether these animals were actual daily staples or just fallback famine foods. Some sources suggest that rural peasants regularly hunted them. Others argue it was more localized or even seasonal. But here you are, nibbling roasted rat on a stick like it's medieval yakitori. The hedgehog, though, that one gets special treatment. You watch as the cook covers it in a clay crust, spikes and all, and buries it in hot embers. After an hour, he cracks the shell open, and the spines come off clean with the hardened mud. What's left is tender, fatty meat, like pork if pork had spent its life rolling in leaves and living on slugs. You try a bite. It's earthy, smoky, weirdly decent. Another man offers you something wrapped in leaves, herb-roasted squirrel, he claims. You raise a brow. Front yard squirrel or forest squirrel? He doesn't answer. It's surprisingly good, though, with a rosemary and vinegar glaze that makes you forget you're chewing something that once climbed trees. Here's a quirky detail. Hedgehog recipes even appear in royal cookbooks like The Form of Cury, which includes instructions to parboil and roast with ginger pepper and saffron. Not exactly fast food, but proof that even nobles weren't above exotic snacks, at least for spectacle. Some vendors fry frogs in garlic oil and lay them across crusty flatbread, calling it green chicken. Others offer something they swear is pheasant, but it smells suspiciously like seagull. You nod politely and back away. There's also a street chef flamboyantly preparing a dish known as gruette of entrails. It's exactly what it sounds like, chopped animal guts boiled in barley and thickened with blood. Your appetite vanishes. The cook winks and says it builds character. You lie and say you're fasting, and over at the fringe of the square, an apothecary's assistant offers charred mole tonic. It's basically burned mole mixed with herbs ground into paste and sold in tiny wax-wrapped balls. Supposedly good for the lungs, probably better as poison. You pause to consider, how did they even catch this stuff? Rat traps, snares, slingshots. Children were often the ones tasked with the dirty work. Some towns had rat catchers who doubled as meat suppliers on the sly. Others just relied on sheer speed and an empty stomach. You think back to your own era's late-night snacks, pizza tacos, microwaved burritos, and suddenly realize how oddly similar this is. Fast, cheap, portable, and questionably sourced. Just with more fur. Still in a world where calories were precious and seasoning was expensive, these roasted creatures weren't just food, they were fuel. Wrapped in leaves spiked with herbs, maybe even dipped in mustard if you were fancy. They were medieval protein bars with legs. Once, you polish off your skewer and wipe your hands on your tunic. Across the fire, a small girl giggles as she roasts something small and winged over coals. You don't ask. One last morsel, a toothpick bird, the vendor says. Turns out it's a sparrow. You chew. It's crunchy, bones and all. You're not proud. But you're not hungry either. You drift toward the sound of sizzling oil and shouting vendors. Your stomach now weirdly enthusiastic, despite everything it's been through. They're tucked between a tanner's stall and a fortune teller's tent is a lean-to shack belching steam into the morning air. A faded wooden sign reads, "The Friar's Corner." A boy in a greasy apron lifts a wire basket from a bubbling pot of animal fat. Inside, tiny white fish, whole, crispy, and still staring. Fresh white bait, he grins. Eat the heads, too. You nod. Because sure, why not? The fried fish crackle between your teeth, salty and surprisingly delicate. A squeeze of sour ale vinegar cuts through the grease. This is the medieval version of fast food, and it's genuinely addictive. Fish was everywhere in the Middle Ages. Not just because people liked it, but because the church basically demanded it. On fast days, which could total over 100 a year, meat was off limits, but fish was fair game. Vendors capitalized on that loophole. Enter the rise of fish pies, fried eels, and anything that once swam or squirmed near a riverbank. You step aside to watch a woman wrapping an eel, yes, an actual slippery eel in dough and slapping it into a brick oven. Eel pie. Common among both peasants and nobility. Some pies featured multiple eels artfully arranged into spirals baked with herbs and glazed with saffron, if you were rich or showing off. Historians still argue whether these fish stalls were viewed as indulgent or simply practical. Either way, you're surrounded by them. Fried trout, pickled herring, salted cod, boiled in onion broth, served in wooden bowls, or on the end of a stick, depending on your class and coin. Next to the fryer, another stand offers something called cod fritters. You try one. It's golden and crunchy on the outside, creamy on the inside. Possibly fish, possibly grain, possibly glue. But it's delicious, and it came with a smear of garlicky mustard, so you're not complaining. Now here's a fringe detail in certain port cities like Bristol or Hamburg. Records show entire Fish Friday markets dedicated solely to deep-fried snacks, some of which included jellyfish. Yes, jellyfish. Breaded and fried until chewy. The vendor says it's like chewing sea-flavored gristle. You pretend you didn't hear that. Some stands use oil, but most rely on rendered animal fat, goose pork or beef. The result is tasty, but the smell lingers on your clothes, in your hair, in your soul. You pass a man trying to light his pipe near the fryer, and the vendor swats him away before the whole booth goes up in flames. Further down, you find a battered stall offering herb chips. Not potatoes, they hadn't arrived in Europe yet, but fried parsnip slivers sprinkled with rosemary and salt. Close enough. There's even a proto-ketchup made of wine vinegar and fermented fish guts. You dip a parsnip. You immediately regret it. And let's not ignore the fish heads. In some towns, they were a snack all their own. Boiled, spiced, and then fried again, crunchy cartilage and all. You bite one and hear something pop. You pretend that was intentional. Near the edge of the market, a slightly fancier stall is offering fish fingers, though they're not the kind you know. These are long strips of salted herring breaded and fried, served with horseradish. A young boy dips his into honey. You squint. He shrugs. Don't knock it till you try it. You move on, licking oil from your fingertips. Behind you, a cat darts under a table and drags off a discarded fishtail. Street food etiquette in medieval towns: if it hits the dirt, it's probably claimed by animals, not other people. You sit on a warm stone ledge, watching the fryer dump a fresh batch of tiny fish into the pot. They crackle and hiss, releasing a scent that's equal parts inviting and alarming. You sip a cup of watered-down mead to wash down the salt. One last fun fact: some nobles deep-fried roses. Actual flower petals battered in egg yolk and flour sprinkled with sugar and saffron. It was more about showing off than snacking. But hey, if you're rich, even your junk food wears perfume. You exhale. The sun's high now. The fryer wipes his brow and calls for more oil. You're full of fish-fried roots and questionable choices, but somehow you're still hungry for what comes next. As the sky dips toward dusk and torches start to sputter in iron brackets along the lanes, you notice something strange. The streets are getting louder, not quieter. A whole new market is stirring awake. Wooden shutters creak open, sleepy-eyed vendors unpack baskets, and the unmistakable smell of sweet pastry and roasted nuts rides in on the cool evening air. Welcome to the night shift of medieval junk food, the moonlit version of temptation. You meander into a small square where night traders set up stalls only after the sun has gone. A man with a stained apron holds up a tray of pastries filled with what he claims is medicinal honey and stimulating herbs. He leans in. It helps with nighttime matters. You take a cautious bite. It's sticky, spiced with nutmeg and pepper, and alarmingly warming. Historians still argue whether aphrodisiac snacks were widespread, or mostly urban legend. But they show up in plenty of records: pastries stuffed with spiced figs, candied dates soaked in wine, even fried fritters sprinkled with crushed fennel and powdered mandrake root. Not FDA approved, but very popular among the hopeful and the hopeless alike. A soft lute plays in the background, probably more romantic than the food warrants. A woman sets out a tray of mooncakes. No, not the Chinese kind. These are dense, flat honey and sage rounds with a silver coin baked inside. Bite carefully. A fringe tradition. You overhear some couples would eat these cakes together before slipping off to secret meetings. The coin, if found, was said to bring luck or fertility. You suddenly chew more thoughtfully. Over by a small alley, a vendor balances a pot of warm milk laced with saffron and rosewater over coals. He ladles it into clay cups and hands it out with a wink. For dreams, he whispers. Good or strange, your choice. You sip. It tastes like flowers and sugar, thick and comforting. You imagine nobles sipping this in silk sheets. Then you look down at your own sticky tunic and remember you're not a noble. At best, you're a moderately well-fed peasant with deeply questionable life choices. But not all night foods are soft and dreamy. Some are meant to keep you awake. You spot a barrel labeled burnt spice nuts, roasted almonds coated in blackened sugar and cayenne. A few bites in your tongue goes numb and your sinuses clear, efficient. Another man sells grilled onions on sticks. To keep the demons away, he says deadly serious. Whether he means actual demons or metaphorical ones is unclear, but you buy one anyway, for safety. There's a pair of women hawking cinnamon chews, gummy, syrupy chunks wrapped in beeswax. They were likely more common among the wealthy, but sometimes vendors would sell smaller, cheaper pieces to the crowds. You unwrap one and chew. Your teeth stick together. Your jaw locks slightly. You're either cursed or deeply satisfied. And here's a surprise: a traveling monk passes by with a box of what looks like chocolate. But it's not, it's carob paste rolled with honey and pepper, imported from southern lands and rare enough to pass for exotic. He offers you a piece. You pretend to appreciate the flavor. You really don't. Then there's bedtime bread, a lightly sweetened roll filled with nuts and dried fruit baked just before midnight to signal the end of a long, fast day. Some towns rang a bell when it was sold, and the scent of warm loaves drifting through the streets became a sleepy comfort. The fringe bit. In one Flemish town, people believed that if you ate such bread while looking at the moon, your dreams would be prophetic. You try it. The moon's out. Let's see if tonight brings visions or just indigestion. A group of children giggles nearby, faces sticky with honey and smoke. They're holding fried cheese curds on skewers, simple, affordable, and strangely satisfying. One of them dips his into the rose milk and laughs, an innovator. The market pulses with warmth and spice even as the night grows colder. You sip, snack, chew, and listen. The food may be humble, even laughable, but it carries with it a kind of intimacy. Lovers sneaking cakes, old women selling herbs with secrets, children trading sugar like currency. And when your feet are sore and your belly's full again, how does this keep happening? You find a quiet nook behind a shuttered booth, curl up under your cloak, and bite one last time into a honey cake still warm, still fragrant, still slightly questionable. You'll sleep well. Or not. Depends on what that last spice was. The sun's just cresting over the abbey spires when you find yourself trudging along a quiet lane, bellies of sleeping pigs heaving just outside a stone wall. You think it's peaceful until you hear the unmistakable snap of a wafer somewhere nearby. Then you smell it, cinnamon clove and melted sugar, drifting through the cold morning air. You follow your nose like any self-respecting medieval glutton. Behind the high cloister walls, a monk hums to himself as he carefully removes a pan from a small oven. Inside are rows of perfect little pastries, neatly folded, glazed with egg yolk, and dusted with crushed almonds. He doesn't see you peering through the gate, but you see enough. Monks weren't just prayer machines. They were snack engineers. Inside the monastery kitchens, food wasn't just fuel. It was a tool for devotion community, and let's be honest, indulgence in disguise, especially on feast days. And monks, with their access to imported spices, dried fruits, fine flour, and honey, made some of the most decadent holy snacks in the medieval world. But here's the catch: these goodies were technically only for special occasions, like Easter, Christmas, or the feast day of a local saint with a long, unpronounceable name. That didn't stop the more mischievous brethren from sneaking a bite during midnight prayers or baking test batches every other Tuesday. One fringe document describes a Benedictine monk in the 1300s reprimanded for baking almond fritters in excess. His defense, he was testing for texture in humility. Smooth move. You wander into a smaller town's chapel and find a young boy selling sweetened wafers outside. Monk-made, he says. Probably stolen, definitely delicious. These are light, crisp discs stamped with religious symbols, crosses, saints, even the odd fish. They taste of honey and flour and holy loopholes. Historians still argue whether monasteries were havens of pious restraint or secret dens of sugar-hoarding mischief. But the recipe records don't lie. Those kitchens turned out fig cakes, spiced bread, candied orange peel, and sometimes even marzipan sculpted into little lambs or angels. You know, for devotion, definitely not dessert. You stop at a bench where a group of traveling pilgrims are passing around a jar of something thick and golden. It's called electuary, a blend of honey and herbs used as both medicine and candy. The pilgrims are taking spoonfuls and laughing. You try some. It's like thyme-flavored jam spiked with clove and mystery. Good for your lungs, they say. Great for your taste buds. And the monks didn't stop at sweets. Some of them brewed beer stronger than most soldiers could handle, deep dark, and sometimes sweetened with herbs and spices like licorice root coriander, or even rose petals. One abbey near the Rhine reportedly brewed a black brew so potent it was served only in tiny cups and reserved for feast day breakfasts. Yes, breakfasts. You find a sister at a nearby convent, quietly handing out small saffron buns wrapped in linen. They help with reflection, she says. You take one. It's golden soft and spiked with raisins. Definitely reflective. Some convents, especially those with noble patrons, were known for their extensive gardens and preserved treats, candied rose hips, violet sugar, pickled cherries, and sweet vinegar syrups. Not exactly peasant fare, but if you knew someone behind the wall, you'd be fed like a saint. Here's the quirky part. In several manuscripts, monks use dessert metaphors in their theological writing. Heaven as a honeyed feast. Virtue as a well-risen bread. Sin as spoiled dough. The line between kitchen and chapel got blurry fast. You pass an older friar sitting by the abbey's herb garden, nibbling something rolled in crushed hazelnuts. He glances at your curious stare and mutters, "For my blood and my soul." He doesn't elaborate. You take a seat nearby and pull from your pouch a sticky walnut tart you bartered off a novice earlier. It smells like sugar and a hint of smugness. As the bells toll for morning prayers, the scent of baking starts to rise again from the hidden ovens behind those thick stone walls. Somewhere in there, someone's folding pastry with divine intention and a heavy hand of cinnamon. You smile. Holiness, it seems, pairs well with butter. The day has warmed, and you're wandering through the merchant's district, where the smells shift from roasted meat and boiling hops to something far more exotic, sweet tart and tinged with spice. Your eyes land on a stall swathed in faded silks, manned by a trader with sun-browned skin and a voice smoother than melted butter. Imported delights, he says, gesturing to bowls of sticky, jewel-like fruit. Just don't ask how they got here. You lean in. Figs soaked in honeyed wine, dates stuffed with crushed walnuts, candied orange peel curled like ribbons. And at the center of the display, a small dish of glistening fruit slices, golden and translucent. The label reads, "Quince. Forbidden." You take a bite. It's soft tart perfumed like roses and danger. In the Middle Ages, exotic fruits were symbols of wealth trade connections and sometimes sheer recklessness. Many were dried or preserved in syrup to survive the long journeys across the Mediterranean and over the Alps. Sugar was still a luxury, so the preservation process itself elevated these snacks from simple fare to aristocratic indulgence. And yet here you are on a dusty corner sampling forbidden fruit with sticky fingers and no regrets. Historians still argue whether these delicacies made it into common people's hands or remained locked behind noble gates. But merchants were clever. They'd sell tiny samples, slivers of candied lemon peel raisins, or even preserved melon to peasants during festivals. Just enough to taste the dream. The forbidden label isn't just marketing. In some places, fruits like pomegranate or banana were seen as foreign and even suspicious, linked to strange lands, foreign gods, or feared humors. Superstitions swirled. One fringe tale you overhear warns that eating too many figs on a full moon will make your teeth fall out. You keep chewing anyway. You walk past a row of tables shaded by embroidered canopies. One sells sugared citron, intensely bitter until boiled in syrup for days. It's tough, chewy, and leaves your mouth tingling. Another booth offers dates rolled in crushed fennel and black pepper. That one takes you by surprise. Sweet, spicy, then almost medicinal. Your face contorts. The vendor grins. An acquired taste, he says. There's also fruit leather strips of plum and apple mashed, dried, and wrapped in waxed linen. Medieval fruit roll-ups, essentially. Practical, long-lasting, and surprisingly tasty. Perfect for pilgrims, travelers, and snackers who didn't want to break a tooth on a rock-hard biscuit. A young girl sells syrup cakes, flattened wafers soaked in wine reduction and dusted with sugar and cinnamon. You ask what's inside. She shrugs. Whatever fruit didn't rot. Comforting. And here's a fringe delight, bottled pears, slowly boiled in red wine, clove, and honey, sealed into glass jars with wax. They shimmer like rubies. You try one. It tastes like luxury and slightly burnt spice. Another oddity is preserved medlar, technically a fruit, but only edible after it's gone soft and nearly rotten. The term for it is bletted. Medieval snackers knew this. You try a spoonful. It's gritty, strange, and tastes like spicy apple pudding that once had dreams. The nobleman's version of fruit stuffed into elaborate pastries, turned into jellies, molded into birds, or layered into massive confections. You glimpse one at a distant banquet hall window, stacked glazed apples inside a sugar shell, shaped like a cathedral. Edible architecture. Probably took 5 cooks and 7 curses to make. But tonight, as you walk along a colonnade strung with lanterns, a vendor with a gold-threaded shawl offers you the most precious snack of the lot. A sugared fig stuffed with pine nuts rolled in powdered rose petals. You don't ask how much. You trade your last coin and eat it slowly. It's soft, sweet, floral, almost sacred, and for one brief moment, as the flavor settles on your tongue and the candlelight flickers just right, you don't feel like a filthy street sleeper who ate hedgehog yesterday. You feel fancy. You wipe your fingers on your sleeve and smile. Exotic or not forbidden or not fruit never felt this indulgent. You're starting to feel confident in your street snacking choices. After all, you've survived rat-on-a-stick mystery fritters and a cheese that looked back at you. But nothing prepares you for the next sensation, that one painfully unpredictable element in medieval junk food heat. You bite into a sausage wrapped in oily parchment still steaming from the coals. The first chew is glorious, meaty, rich, spiced with cinnamon and clove. But then it hits. A slow-building burn that goes from gentle warmth to full-throttle fireball in about 4 seconds. Your eyes water. Your lips tingle. You're gasping, hand flailing blindly for a jug of something, anything milk, ale, holy water. Congratulations. You've just encountered the medieval version of a chili dare, though chili peppers hadn't yet arrived in Europe. Thank you. Columbian exchange still centuries off, medieval cooks didn't lack for heat. They used mustard seeds, horseradish, long pepper, and the occasional unholy amount of black peppercorns. And they weren't shy about it. Spice was a status symbol imported from distant lands at jaw-dropping prices. Dumping half your spice cupboard into a sausage that was showing off, historians still argue whether this spice frenzy was purely about flavor, or if it masked the, let's say, creative freshness levels of medieval meat. Some claim people just loved to sweat at dinner. Others insist it was ritualistic heat as purification. You just know your mouth is on fire and someone is laughing. A cook at the next booth beckons you over, eyes twinkling with mischief. She offers a small round pastry called a fire crust. Inside, minced pork and dried berries seasoned with ginger, clove, garlic, and mustard. You take a bite with caution. It's sweet, then sour, then a slap of heat across the tongue. It's a peasant's aphrodisiac, she says, winking. You pretend to laugh, but feel your sinuses clear like someone just cast a spell. Pepper cakes are popular here, gingerbread's older, wilder cousin. Crumbly dark, made with rye flour, and spiked with black pepper and aniseed. There's also mulled wine sold from a huge bronze cauldron ladled into wooden cups. It tastes like cloves, honey, and firewood. A liquid embrace until your throat burns halfway down. One merchant offers a thick syrup made from boiled down vinegar spice and crushed raisins. Good for digestion, he insists. You take a cautious sip and immediately feel like you've gargled spiced tar. You hand it back. He just shrugs. It'll clear your humors. Even sweets aren't safe. Candied nuts rolled in cinnamon and white pepper. Spiced apple tarts with just enough kick to make your eyebrows dance. One stall sells dragon's breath wafers, paper-thin discs flavored with mustard oil. You try one and nearly cough out your soul, but not all heat was culinary. Some believed spice had metaphysical properties. Heat cleansed. It stirred the blood, energized the spirit. It could even burn away disease. A physician's treatise from the 13th century praises pepper as God's own fire against inner coldness. You just think it's trying to kill you. As night creeps in and your taste buds beg for mercy, a kind-hearted brewer offers a milky barley drink laced with honey and crushed mint. The relief is instant. You gulp gratefully, nodding thanks. First time she asks, smiling. You nod again, eyes watery. You'll learn. And maybe you are learning. That medieval junk food wasn't about comfort. It was bold, chaotic, often painful. A wild ride for the senses' flavor as shock therapy. Food that bites back. You sit near the stone wall of a chapel, cooling off in the breeze, licking crumbs from your sleeve, reflecting on your poor choices. You wouldn't trade this experience for anything, except maybe a glass of modern milk and a tongue that doesn't feel like it's been slapped by a flaming boot. Still, somewhere deep in your now seasoned soul, you suspect you might try another fire crust tomorrow. You wake up sore from the stone bench and groggy from the lingering spice fumes still coating your tongue. As you shuffle along the cobbled streets, You spot something that stops you dead in your tracks, a line of servants carrying ornate dishes through a side gate gilded in bronze. You're definitely not invited, but who says you can't take a peek? Welcome to the forbidden world of noble junk food, where calories come dipped in gold leaf and indulgence has a staff of 12. You creep along the hedgerow just enough to peer through a break in the wall. Inside is a garden set for a private feast. And by feast, you mean something halfway between a dinner party and a performance art piece. There's an entire roasted peacock being reassembled with its feathers posed mid-strut. A giant pie is sliced open, and yes, really live birds flutter out. Guests clap like it's a magic trick. You blink. Did you inhale too much pepper last night? But this isn't a hallucination. Nobles in medieval Europe took food theater seriously. And yes, this includes a category of food we might call junk treats with no nutritional purpose other than pleasure and showing off. A serving boy passes with tiny marzipan sculptures, horses, castles, and saints, all edible, all too pretty to eat. But nobles did eat them mostly as symbols of wealth. Sugar was astronomically expensive, often locked in chests like treasure. The fact that these lords molded it into snack-sized toys and chomped them down, that was the flex. You watch a platter of jellies wobble past, each one shaped like a mythical creature dragon griffin, even what looks suspiciously like a dolphin wearing a crown. Historians still argue whether jelly molds were common or commissioned just for feasts, you whisper to yourself, sounding far too academic for someone eavesdropping behind a bush. One lady delicately spoons a dish of rose-petal custard, then dabs her lips with a cloth embroidered in gold thread. Meanwhile, her neighbor is attacking a leech pudding, which thankfully has nothing to do with blood-sucking worms. It's a sweet made from milk rice, flour, sugar, and sometimes almonds or honey, set into pastel-colored cubes. One version even glows faintly thanks to crushed pearls. You cough and duck lower. Then comes the candied citrus, imported oranges and lemons, peeled, boiled, then soaked in sugar syrup until translucent. Sunlight in a bite, someone says. You wouldn't know. You're chewing yesterday's oat biscuit. Of course, all this elegance isn't just about taste. It's about status. The nobility could afford absurdly impractical treats. Edible gold leaf used to garnish pastries. Sugar paste molded into entire table settings, then smashed like piñatas. There's even a rumor that one king commissioned a life-sized knight made entirely of gingerbread. You believe it. And here's the part that stings: nobles didn't even eat all of it. Sometimes the most extravagant dishes were displayed and then taken away uneaten just to make a statement. You sigh. You'd kill for one of those jelly dolphins. But not everything is glamorous. You spot a young page sneaking bites from a side tray, less elegant stuff, meant for lower-ranking staff. Trays of sweetened porridge, fried dough balls rolled in syrup, and hard wafers flavored with nutmeg. Even noble kitchens produced scraps, and some of those scraps absolute bangers. One cook passing by with a scorched apron tosses a little bundle of fried almond paste toward your bush. It lands near your foot. You glance around and pop it into your mouth. It's perfect. Warm, crunchy at the edges, sugary without being cloying. Probably a failed tart, but to your peasant palate, divine. You lean back and sigh. Junk food for nobles may be out of reach, but even in their waste, there's wonder. Behind the velvet and jewels, even they crave sugar highs and crunchy textures, just dressed up in peacock feathers and floral perfume. And that makes you feel a bit better. Because no matter the rank, junk food still does what it's meant to do: spark a grin, tempt a nibble, and leave sticky fingers and a lighter heart. You wake again, this time to shouting, rhythmic, chaotic, joyful shouting. You've stumbled smack into a medieval festival day, and the streets have turned into a food fight. Literally. Your first instinct is to duck, which is smart, because a stale, hot cross bun whizzes past your ear like a holy grenade. Someone laughs maniacally and lobs a sausage on a stick across the square. Another fellow, face painted half blue, is carrying what looks like a roasted eel, like a dueling sword. Welcome to the joyous mayhem of festival foods, where the line between sacred ritual and junk-fueled chaos becomes very, very blurry. The church bells toll in the distance, and with them comes a parade of carts overflowing with treats. During major feast days, Easter, Christmas, Michaelmas, or even obscure local Saint Days villages often erupted into culinary carnivals. While the elite feasted in manor halls, the common folk took to the streets and let loose. You spot a booth where massive boiled eggs in armor are being handed out. Eggs wrapped in layers of meat and pastry, then boiled or fried until golden and oddly aggressive looking. They bounce slightly when thrown. Someone is keeping score. This is a game now. Not far from that, a lucky pie is being sliced. The rules. Eat your slice and pray it doesn't contain a live frog or a wooden trinket symbolizing misfortune. Someone shrieks. Turns out they found the baby carved from dried apple. They now owe the town free beer, apparently. And the smells, oh the smells. Honey cakes sizzle on griddles, battered apples pop and fizz in lard-filled kettles, and roasted nuts are stirred with wooden spoons longer than your leg. A friar very drunk tries to sell you a spirit cake soaked in mead. You decline. He eats it himself and falls over in a sugar coma. Historians still argue whether some of these foods were symbolic or just excuses to use extra lard. You murmur while chewing something sticky, possibly licorice root dipped in honey. Whatever it is, it's giving your molars a medieval workout. In another corner, there's a competition involving combat cabbages. Contestants take turns rolling heavy stuffed pastries at each other like bowling balls. You watch a particularly muscular milkmaid topple a baker with a direct hit to the shin. People cheer. You make a note to never mess with her. Here's the thing about medieval festivals. They were rare bursts of calorie-rich joy in a world often obsessed with scarcity. And when the feast days hit, so did the weird food customs. One town made singing cheese where holes were poked into a block to whistle in the wind. Another had contests to eat black pudding without using hands, dangerous yet oddly ceremonial. You pass a tent where someone is stirring a pot of angel's butter soon, basically melted sugar and milk whipped with herbs and saffron. A child dips a wooden stick in and slurps it like a medieval lollipop. You ask what's in it. She replies magic, then skips off. Meanwhile, a traveling juggler juggles what else turnips. He's followed by a dog wearing a pie crust like a cape. You wonder if the dog is part of the act, or just really into the festival vibe. You find a seat beside a fire pit, and are handed something wrapped in leaves. You bite in nuts, dates, breadcrumbs, and cinnamon all mashed together and sweetened with honey. It's basically a medieval protein bar. If protein bars came with pine needles and wood smoke, you're not complaining. Now and then, things take a turn for the absurd. A man stands on a barrel reciting a ballad about the sausage that betrayed him. Someone near you drops a whole jelly and shouts, "Long live the goose." You decide it's best not to ask questions. But amid the mess and madness, something clicks. These bizarre, playful foods served more than hunger. They were relief. Release, a sugar-coated revolt against the usual fasts and famine. Even peasants deserved a break, and maybe a pie with legs. Before long, torches are lit. The crowd dances in a circle, nibbling gingerbread men with blank stares and almond eyes. Someone tries to hand you blessed marshes, a puffed treat made of eggs, rosewater, and crushed nuts. You take two. So you sit sugar-dazed, surrounded by sticky fingers and wine-stained smiles, and realize this medieval junk food was more than a snack. It was a way to celebrate life when life didn't always feel like celebrating. You wake up once more this time to the clomp of boots and the jangle of bells. You're on a narrow dirt road, the kind that stretches endlessly between sleepy hamlets and sacred shrines. Around you, weary travelers with heavy packs, dusty cloaks, and an unmistakable scent of dried meat and feet. Congratulations, you've joined a medieval pilgrimage and your stomach is growling. Food on the road isn't glamorous, but it has to be portable filling and preferably not rotten. That's where medieval travel treats the original junk food to go come in. Think less about Instagrammable lunches and more about, will this keep for a week stuffed under my belt in July? You fumble in your satchel and pull out a popular standby, a meat pie the size of a clenched fist, sealed tight in a crust thick enough to survive a minor joust. The outside's hard as armor, but inside warm spiced pork or maybe eel or pigeon. No one ever really knows. Next to you, a fellow pilgrim unwraps a linen bundle to reveal seed cakes, dense discs made of flour lard and poppy or fennel seeds. They're chewy, salty, sweet, and weirdly hypnotic when you're on mile 40. Another traveler offers you a strip of cured bacon fat, tucked between barley flatbreads. For stamina, he says solemnly. You take it. It's delicious. People often imagine the Middle Ages as nothing but gruel and fasting. But on the road, you see a different culinary ingenuity. Pilgrims swap recipes, bribe monks for secret cheese wheels, and carry candied herbs from shrine to shrine. Sugar-coated anise seeds, for example, are traded like gold treat and breath freshener in one. You pass a woman selling holy honey nuts, roasted hazelnuts soaked in mead, and rolled in crushed mint leaves, the holy part. She claims they were blessed by a friar. Historians still argue whether those roadside friars actually blessed food, or just blessed the coins. As the sun climbs, your group pauses beneath a linden tree. Time for lunch. A younger lad opens a sack and pulls out something pungent onion bread thick with herbs and specks of dried apple. His sister unwraps a triangle of smoked cheese clearly aged in someone's barn. It smells like regret, but tastes like victory. Nearby, a merchant nibbles on sugared rose petals, fragile and oddly elegant, amid the dirt and sweat. For the heart, she says, popping another into her mouth. Or just boredom. That's the secret charm of medieval junk food, half sustenance, half entertainment. You notice a few people chewing something rubbery and dark. Turns out it's licorice root, prized for soothing sore throats and bad moods. You try it. It tastes like sweet bark, which is not inaccurate. Your own stash includes oat cakes laced with dried berries, a lump of pressed fig and walnut paste, and a suspiciously hard honey ball you've been saving since Tuesday. You try to bite it. You regret it. A nearby nun watches you and offers a knowing nod. Let it melt, she whispers, as if this is sacred knowledge. The landscape changes. Hills roll by, the smell of lavender floats in from a field, and the chatter grows gentler. You pass shrines and chapels where sellers hawk miracle wafers, thin biscuits flavored with cinnamon and saffron said to protect you from illness. Scholars now debate whether these were actually medicinal or just very clever marketing. Either way, they're delicious. Night falls and the group settles near a stream. Fires flicker. You trade your last bit of almond nougat for a slice of pilgrim's pudding, which is not pudding at all, but a cold lump of dried fruit and breadcrumbs packed into a cloth and boiled 2 days ago. It tastes like old church candles, but fills your belly. And then the laughter begins, pilgrims telling stories of taverns with ghost beer, or the man who swore eating 12 chestnuts would give him visions. A woman recites a rhyme about traveling turnips that somehow always reappear no matter how far you walk. You lie back full enough, warm enough, and surprisingly content. Even in a world without refrigeration, food finds a way to comfort. It travels in pouches, pockets, and prayers. It passes from stranger to stranger, flavored by dust, desperation, and hope. So there you are, belly full of road-worn junk food, head full of stars curled beneath the sky like a crumb-covered hedgehog. Not bad for the 12th mile of the day. You wake to the sound of buzzing. Not birds, not bells buzzing. A low, persistent hum. You sit up, stretch your back, and squint at what's nestled in a nearby traveler's pack, a wheel of cheese. Not just any cheese, though. This one moves, just slightly. Welcome to the strange, squirming world of medieval cheese, and one particularly infamous variety known to modern folklore as the cheese that screams. Before refrigeration, cheese wasn't just a dairy product. It was a preservation strategy, a protein ration, and in some twisted cases, a dare. You pick up a wedge of soft, gooey cheese from a local vendor and give it a sniff. Sharp, tangy, a little foot-like. Then it wriggles. No, that wasn't a hallucination brought on by yesterday's miracle wafers. Some cheeses, particularly in the warmer Mediterranean regions, played host to cheese fly larvae intentionally or otherwise. These squirmy inhabitants broke down fats in the cheese and gave it that oh-so-creamy texture. Casu marzu, a descendant of such cheeses, still exists today in parts of Sardinia. And yes, it's technically banned in many places. Historians still argue whether these maggot-ridden cheeses were delicacies or just accidents people learned to tolerate because they tasted too good to throw away. Or maybe because surprise protein was better than no protein. You try to stay open-minded. After all, medieval junk food often meant embracing the weird. One fryer nearby boasts about a mold-covered blue cheese aged in a hollowed gourd. He claims it healed his toothache. It didn't. He's missing 2 teeth. In a nearby village, a man peddles screaming cheese at the market, warning everyone not to slice it near heat. The worms don't like the sun, he whispers. Someone slices it anyway. The larvae writhe. A child shrieks. The cheese remains stoic. Elsewhere, you encounter cheese curds wrapped in brined grape leaves, nut-studded goat cheese wheels, and something called fire cheese, supposedly aged by burying it next to a blacksmith's forge for a full moon cycle. Scholars doubt that story, but hey, people believe worse. Then there's stinky cheese diplomacy nobles sending pungent wheels of triple-aged curd across borders as gifts, insults, or sometimes both. The Count of Savoy once sent King Edward a cheese so strong it cleared an entire feast hall, one night tells you. On purpose, probably. Some cheeses double as dessert. Sweet ones whipped with honey and dried herbs were popular with both peasants and priests. At a roadside stand, you try cheese fritters dipped in plum syrup, crispy, melty, addictive. You burn your tongue. Worth it. Even the monastic orders had their dairy secrets. Tucked inside abbey cellars were wheels aged in salt-lined barrels turned daily by novices and brushed with ash or herbs. One monk describes a lavender-rubbed sheep cheese they only unveil on feast days. You wonder if monks judged holiness by flavor. Spoiler, some definitely did. And then there's the cheese cart duel, a tale you overhear one night. Two vendors in Rouen both claimed their cheese had divine origin. Naturally, they challenged each other by leaving wheels in the town square to see which attracted fewer flies. Jury's out on who won, but locals say the smell lasted a week. You bite into a wheel of aged cheddar so strong it bites back. The flavor is deep, sharp, ancient. You can taste the cellar walls, the straw it cured on, maybe even the emotions of the cheesemaker. Probably resentment. Maybe ambition. By now, you're something of a connoisseur. You know to tap a cheese to check for hollowness. You can spot a bloomed rind from 10 feet away. You even try a floating cheese, a weird trend where wedges were boiled and served in mead. It sounds like a crime. Somehow it's not. You're handed a parting gift by an old woman, a wrapped bundle of smoked apple cheese aged in wax and rolled in time. For the road, she says with a wink. Or for enemies. Night falls again, and under the moonlight, you chew thoughtfully. Cheese in all its oozy, crawling glory is more than junk food. It's science, survival, and surprise. Some scream, some melt, some bite. But all of them, yes, even the maggoty ones, tell a story. It's a drizzly morning. You're weaving through a cramped medieval alleyway with the unmistakable odor of baked goods in the air. Delicious, yes, but laced with something more sinister, sewage smoke and spoiled fish. That's because the pie you're eyeing is being sold directly across from a dung cart. Welcome to the roulette wheel of medieval street food hygiene. There's no health inspector, no Michelin stars, just a toothless vendor with a charming grin and hands covered in flour, and possibly something else. You decide to gamble. The meat pie is hot, flaky, and oddly peppery. You take a bite. It's either lamb or pigeon. You don't ask. Medieval food stalls pop up anywhere next to fishmongers outside of stables or in shadowy corners of the town square where people relieve themselves when the tavern queue is too long. Vendors serve you food out of wooden buckets that double as chamber pots after dusk. Historians still argue whether many food poisonings were from bad meat or bad water or both. And yet, the allure is irresistible. You spy a boy devouring a skewer of grilled liver slathered in ale reduction. He offers you a bite. You politely decline. A monk walks past, chewing on a warm onion tart, his robes brushing against the greasy cart. He blesses it as he passes. That somehow makes you trust it less. Fringe tip, some medieval cooks deliberately used extra spice or sugar to cover up spoilage. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. But who's going to say no to a plum tart dusted in what looks like sugar but might be powdered limestone? It still tastes like childhood and regret. Wander farther, and you find the multitasking stalls vendors who sell meat pies in front and cure leather in back. The two processes aren't supposed to mix, but when space is tight, who's checking? A dog licks the same bench where raw rabbit was sliced. The butcher shrugs, adds flavor. You stop by a tent offering vegetarian pastries. Inside beets onions and something chewy that isn't a vegetable. The baker assures you it's forest mushroom. Historians still argue what that meant in regions where mushroom identification was more art than science. A gamble, again. There's a moment of calm. Rain trickles from a rooftop into a half-covered barrel where sausages hang drying beside someone's underpants. Dual use, says the vendor. You back away slowly. And yet, amid the chaos, some food is miraculously safe and even delightful. You find a woman boiling chestnuts in honeyed wine, meticulously skimming foam from the surface, her cart pristine. She tells you she once served nobles but got bored of castles. You believe her. Her food tastes like care. Even poor townsfolk knew a few tricks. You watch a child wipe a pewter spoon on their tunic, dunk it in communal soup, then offer it to her younger brother. He's healthy, she says, mostly. You wonder if immune systems in this era come pre-installed with iron stomachs. There's also the mystery of the tavern trenchers, hollowed bread bowls that absorbed the soup, the oil, and the fingers of everyone who shared them. Supposedly, they were handed out to the poor after use. But you overhear one beggar say they just sell them again at dawn. Extra flavor, he smirks. And yes, rats. You don't see them, but you feel them. In the way stalls are built off the ground, how bakers keep a cat curled around flour sacks, or how stall owners whistle sharply before lifting a pie lid just to make sure nothing scurries out. Still, some people thrived in the madness. The most popular vendor in one town, a blind woman with no sense of smell. People said she was immune to the stench and didn't judge her customers' hygiene either. Her cinnamon buns were famous. So was the mold. But no one complained. Eventually, you accept a hard truth. Medieval junk food was less about flavor and more about survival. You didn't ask if something was clean. You asked if it was hot. That usually meant it was fresh, or at least recently boiled, which counts. You finish your meal a carrot turnover with a hint of ash and weirdly mint, and wipe your hands on your cloak. You feel slightly queasy, but in a nostalgic way, like eating fairground food near a porta-potty. And as you walk away full but suspicious, you realize hygiene was optional. Flavor was negotiable. But risk was the spice that made every bite medieval. By now, your stomach is a hardened veteran, and your palate, well, it's either refined or completely broken. But just when you think you've tasted everything questionable and indulgent the Middle Ages had to offer, you're handed a treat that's not just tasty. It's medicinal, allegedly. Welcome to the strange world of medieval healthy junk food, where the line between candy and cure is blurrier than a monk's wine-soaked sermon. You're offered candied fennel seeds, crunchy and sweet with a licorice aftertaste. A nun tells you they freshen the breath and soothe digestion, though she's chewing them faster than she can explain. A passing knight claims he eats them before battle to steady the guts. You're not sure if that means bravery or bowel control. A traveling apothecary waves you over offering rose petal pastilles dusted in sugar. They're delicate, perfumed, and apparently excellent for melancholy heartburn and excessive thoughts. Historians still argue whether such remedies had real effects, or simply distracted you with floral flavor until your ailment passed, or didn't. Next, candied ginger root, sticky and potent. One bite and your tongue burns in the best way. You're told it warms the blood and wards off plague. The merchant gestures to a rat running by and assures you, "See, you're not dead. Good enough." Fringe tip. Many of these medicinal sweets were originally made in monastic pharmacies called apotheques. but ended up in street stalls when people realized healing could be delicious. You pop a licorice lozenge meant for sore throats and bad attitudes, and feel like you've just eaten the Middle Ages version of a cough drop covered in molasses. Of course, you can't ignore the stranger remedies. A woman offers you sugar-coated anise balls to clear phlegm and awaken lust. You accept one and promptly sneeze 3 times. Whether that's a success is unclear. Then come the syrupy pine nuts prized for everything from easing anxiety to curing wind trapped in the spleen. You don't even know where your spleen is, but now you're worried about it. As you nibble on a spiced date filled with cinnamon and ground coriander, a merchant whispers that these treats were often reserved for the wealthy. Sugar was expensive. Imported spices cost even more. The fact that you're eating one now means either you're lucky or about to be swindled, possibly both. Still, it's oddly comforting. The idea that a bite of sweetness could help you sleep better, breathe easier, or survive winter. Sugar was power. Sugar was medicine. And sometimes sugar was simply an excuse to feel joy in a world that was often anything but sweet. You duck into a quiet corner, unwrapping a honeyed almond cluster. A child nearby is licking a similar one with the solemnity of a monk. You both nod at each other, united in a sugary peace treaty. For this moment, all is well. But the truth lingers in your mind, like aftertaste healthy and delicious, rarely walked hand in hand in this era. Most of these treats may have done more for your mood than your health, but that was enough. As twilight settles, you savor your last morsel, a candied violet petal that tastes faintly like perfume and dust, and reflect on this long, strange culinary adventure. You've tasted the food of peasants and nobles, charlatans and healers, monks and street peddlers. Some of it was delightful. Some less so, but all of it was part of what it meant to eat in a time where survival flavored every bite. And now wind down, 300-word wind down. So here you are, full of odd pastries, questionable eels, and a new respect for the immune systems of your medieval ancestors. The markets have gone quiet now, stalls packed away beneath woven tarps, coals cooling in ash. You hear the soft clatter of pots being scrubbed in a nearby alley, water trickling from a bucket, and the distant bray of a donkey as it drifts into sleep. You sit beneath the low-hung eaves of a timber house, fingers sticky with honey, the last bits of sugared almonds tucked away in your pocket for later. A gentle breeze nudges your cloak. In this stillness, the chaos of the day fades, the loud bargaining, the laughing crowds, the heavy scents of spice and smoke, and all that remains is a warm quiet. The stone streets are slick with mist now, and in the dim amber light of an oil lamp, you see a cat padding silently across a rooftop, tail flicking. Someone nearby begins to hum a lullaby, notes soft and slow like honey pouring from a jar. You exhale. The night welcomes you, wraps you in its cool arms. Your heart slows. The taste of sweet fennel still lingers faintly at the back of your tongue, a memory of flavor of time, of strange comforts in stranger centuries. Rest now. The journey is over. Tomorrow perhaps you'll try the fish pudding. Or not. For tonight, let the quiet carry you. Let the dreams come slowly, like dough rising near a hearth. You're safe, you're warm, and you've survived medieval junk food. End of script. Sweet dreams.